Section 4.3, solving two-step equations. We will write and solve two-step equations using the basic operations. But what is a two-step equation? And what does two-step mean? Two-step means you have to use two different math operations to solve the equation. Okay, so you'll use addition or subtraction, and then you'll use multiplication or division. Okay, so two different math operations. And the goal is still the same, variable on one side, numbers on the other, and you have to keep your equation balanced. So what you do to one side, you must do to the other. Okay, one slight addition when you are solving a two-step equation. The first step is to get the constants to the side opposite the variable. So here we have a constant on the same side as the variable. We want to get it to the opposite side. So let's look. This is adding 5, so we want to do the opposite. We want to subtract 5. And what we do to this side, we have to do to this side. So then our equation becomes negative 3x equals negative 3, right? And now what's the operation here? It's multiplication, so we want to do the opposite. So we want to divide. And what are we going to divide by? Negative 3. We have to do it to this side since we did it to that side. And we know negative 3 divided by negative 3 is 1. So we're just left with x. And negative 3 divided by negative 3 is 1. So our solution is x equals 1. But we want to go back and we want to check our answer. So in our original equation, wherever we see an x, we're going to put a 1. So negative 3 times 1 plus 5, what does that equal? We're hoping 2. Negative 3 plus 5, it does equal 2, and it matches our original. So we know our solution here is correct. Okay, one more example. In this example here, we have some fractions, and we are subtracting a fraction here on the side with the variable. So we want to move that over to the other side. And to move it to the other side of the equal sign, we need to do the opposite. And the opposite of subtraction is addition. So we need to add 1/2 to both sides. So then the equation becomes x over 8 equals, well, let's see, negative 7/2 plus 1/2, that's the same as what? Negative 6/2. And negative 6/2 can be simplified to negative 3 because 2 can be divided by 2 and negative 6 can be divided by 2. Okay, and that gives us negative 3. All right, so now looking at our equation now, the original operation is what? Division. So we need to do the opposite, which is multiplication. So we need to multiply both sides by 8. Remember, a whole number in fraction form is 8 over 1, or the whole number over 1. So let's multiply both sides by 8, and we are left with x equals negative 24. Because remember, 8 over 8 is the same as 8 divided by 8, so that's the same as 1. That's why we're left with just x. So our solution is x equals negative 24, but we want to check that, and we would check it by plugging it into our original equation. So wherever we see an x, we're going to put negative 24. So our original equation becomes negative 24 over 8 minus 1/2. And what does that equal? Well, we can change this 1/2 into eighths, right, to make it easier to subtract because we need a common denominator. And what is 1/2 in eighths? It's the same as 4, right? 4/8 is the same as 1/2. So negative 24/8 minus 4/8 equals negative 28/8. But does that match our original? Well, we're not quite sure because this can be simplified, and it can be simplified by dividing the top and the bottom by 4. That is their common, greatest common factor. So 28 divided by 4 is 7. Since it's negative, we'll add that negative, and 8 divided by 4 is 2. So we end up with negative 7/2, and that actually matches our original. So our solution of x equals negative 24 is correct. But I'm going to take a slight pause here and go back to when we were talking about reciprocals. Remember when we talked about we had like 2/3 x equals 1 and we wanted to find out what x equals, and I said multiply it by the reciprocal. But why do you think you multiply it by the reciprocal? Why would you multiply it by 3/2? Well, we know that's going to equal 1, right? Because 6/6 equals 1. But really, if you had 2/3 x and you wanted to do the opposite operation, well, first you would have to divide by 2, right? And then you would have to multiply by 3. And what is that? Doing the opposite of 2/3 is multiplying by the reciprocal. Okay, enough of that side note though. I just thought of it and realized I didn't really talk about it in my last lesson, but wanted to mention it here. Okay, so let's go. And I believe you will be entering in your notes in the first section of your page of notes. There's a fill in the blank and a table. Okay, now that you've had time to do that, we are going to go over combining like terms before we solve. And doing that, combining like terms before you solve, actually makes your life easier, and you will have to do less calculations, less work. So remember, mathematicians like to be efficient, and so combining like terms helps us do a little less work, so we like it. All right. In this equation here, solve 3y minus 8y equals 25. Let's combine these like terms because what? The 3y and the 8y, they both have y to the power of 1, so they are like terms. And 3y minus 8y is the same as negative 5y, right? And what is our operation in this? It's multiplication, so we need to do the opposite, which is division. But what are we dividing by? We're dividing by negative 5. And what we do to this side, we have to do to this side. So y equals negative 5. Okay, and if we go back into our original and we check our answer, 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. And negative 8 times a negative 5 is a positive 40. And 40 minus 15 is 25. And that matches. However, you could also use your simplified version of the equation after you combine like terms, and you can use that to check your answer, which is slightly easier, right? Negative 5, y is negative 5. And what is negative 5 times negative 5? 25. And does that match our original? Yes, it does. So you can check your answer using the original equation or your equation that you had after you combined like terms. Okay, let's look at another example. Negative 6 equals 1/4 w minus 1/2 w. Well, these both have a w to the first power, so let's combine those like terms. 1/4 w minus something w. We want this 1/2 to have the same denominator as the 1/4. So what is 1/2 in fourths? It's the same as 2/4, right? All right, so 1/4 w minus 2/4 w gives you a negative 1/4 w. So our equation now becomes negative 6 equals negative 1/4 w. All right, now we notice there's a fraction in front of our variable, so we want to multiply by the reciprocal. I'm going to move this w over here. And the reciprocal of this is very sloppy. The reciprocal of 1/4 is 4/1. And it's negative, right? As well. So negative 1/4 times 4/1 leaves us with negative times a negative is a positive. 4/4 is the same as 1. So we're left with just w. Okay. And then negative 4 times a negative 6, negative times a negative is a positive. So we're just left with 24. So our answer or our solution is w equals 24. However, let's check that. All right. So we have 1/4 times 24 minus 1/2 times 24. Okay, so 1/4 times 24 is the same as 24/4, which is the same as 6, right? Because 4 divided by 4 is 1, 24 divided by 4 is 6. And then over here, we're left with -1/2 times 24 gives us -24/2. But that's the same as what? -12. Because the top divided by 2 is 12, or -12, and the bottom divided by 2 is 1. So we're left with this. And what is 6 minus 12? It's -6. And -6, it actually matches our original. So our solution up here of W equals 24 is correct. Okay, now it is time for you to write in your notes. In the bottom half of your note page, you will fill in a blank and complete a table. Okay, now that you've had time to do those practice problems, those notes, it's now time for you to do your practice problems. And there are 1, 2, 3 of them. Okay, practice problem number 1. I am going to go through it, get it started for you. You can check to make sure that you are on the right path, and then I will check your answer when I come around to check your notes. Okay, so the first one, -5c plus 9 equals -16. Well, we want to get in this two-step solution, we want to get the constant to the other side. We do the opposite. Opposite of addition is subtraction. So we want to subtract 9 from both sides. So we are left with -5c equals -25. Okay, so what are you going to do now? This is multiplication. You're going to do division, but what are you going to divide by? Okay, so you should get something for C. Okay, now my hints on number 2. Okay, so 2/5 is the constant, right? So we want to subtract it since it's a positive. So let's subtract 2/5 from both sides. That leaves us with a/4 equals, see, -6/5 minus 2/5 gives us what? -8/5, right? So now here on this side, we have a/4, but this is the same as division, right? A divided by 4. So original equation has division. We need to do the opposite, which is what? Multiplication. But what are we going to multiply by? Something. And you have to multiply that on both sides, right? All right. So that's an A. I will leave it up to you then to figure out the rest and find out what is A. Okay. Last practice problem. Practice problem number 3. Here we have our constant. We need to move it to the other side. But how do we move it to the other side? Well, it's positive. We need to do the opposite. We need to subtract it. Ooh, my mistake. I didn't see that M there. So let's start that over. This is, both have M to the power of 1. So we need to combine this like term, right? These like terms. 1.3M minus 2.1M. What is that? Negative 0.8M. All right. That equals -8. Okay, so here we have what? Multiplication. We need to do the opposite. We need to divide. But what are you going to divide by? Okay, when you figure that out, you will be able to come up with what M equals, and I will check your answers as I come around to check off your notes. All right, I hope that helps. And that ends 4.3.